Kia ora, tamariki. Again, we'll be reading Danny, Champion of the World. Just a quick review. What happened last chapter? What can you remember from last chapter? Take a moment to think about that. Pause the video if you like. After you remember what happened last chapter, what do you think will happen this chapter? This chapter is called The Big Friendly Giant. So just a quick recap. We know Danny's a boy. He lives with his father in a small caravan. They own a filling station, and the dad's a mechanic. And at the moment, he sounds to be about 5, 6, 7 years of age, maybe even 8. So I'm going to jump in and start reading the chapter The Big Friendly Giant. Chapter 2. My father, without the slightest doubt, was the most marvelous and exciting father any boy ever had. Here is a picture of him. You might think, if you didn't know him well, that he was a stern and serious man. He wasn't. He was actually a wildly funny person. What made him appear so serious was the fact that he never smiled with his mouth. He did it all with his eyes. He had brilliant blue eyes, and when he thought of something funny, his eyes would flash, and if you looked carefully, you could actually see a tiny little golden spark dancing in the middle of each eye, but the mouth never moved. I was glad my father was an eye smiler. It meant he never gave me a fake smile because it's impossible to make your eyes twinkle if you aren't feeling twinkly yourself. A mouth smile is different. You can fake a mouth smile anytime you want, simply by moving your lips. I've also learned that a real mouth smile always has an eye smile to go with it. So watch out, I say, when someone smiles at you with his mouth, but his eyes stay the same. It's sure to be bogus. So how about we just pause the video there and see if you can smile with your eyes without moving your mouth. Or if you want to move your mouth, how do you smile, a real smile with your mouth? Is it like this? Or is it a fake one like this? Can you tell the difference between a real smile and a fake smile? Can you spot the difference in someone's eyes when they are smiling a real eye smile? Monterroy is pretty tricky, pretty hard to find out if he's really eye smiling, because when I smile, my face goes like this, so my eyes just go like real flat. So it's hard to tell if I'm an eye smile or not, because you don't really see my eyes when I smile. So I go like this. It almost looks painful when I smile. My father was not what you would call an educated man, and I doubt if he had read 20 books in his life. But he was a marvelous storyteller. He used to make up a bedtime story for me every single night, but the best ones turned into serials and went on for many nights running. Serials. Pause a moment and think what serials might be. Cereals. If you thought cereals was the breakfast dish you have, they have in a bowl with milk, that is not cereals. Cereals means as a sentence. Let's read the sentence again. The best ones were turned into cereals and went on for many nights running. So cereals means there's more than one of them, 2 or more of the same story continuous. So popular cereals are, I guess, the Toy Story dynasty. There's 4 of those movies. Serials are TV shows like Shortland Street's a serial because they continue to have the story ongoing, not just one-off little episodes. Okay, let's continue reading. One of them, which most which which must have gone for at least 50 nights, was about an enormous fellow called the Big Friendly Giant, the BFG for short. The BFG was 3 times tall as an ordinary man, and his hands were as big as wheelbarrows. He lived in a vast underground cavern not far from our filling station, and he only came out into the open when it was dark. Inside the cavern, he had a powder factory where he made more than 100 different kinds of magic powder. Occasionally, he told his stories. My father would stride up and down, waving his arms and wagging his fingers, but mostly he would sit close to me on the edge of my bunk and speak very softly. The Big Friendly Giant makes his magic powders out of the dreams that children dream when they are asleep, he said. How? I asked. Tell me how, Dad. Dreams, my love, are very mysterious things. They float around in the night air like little clouds, searching for sleeping people. Can you see them? I asked. Nobody can see them. Then how does the Big Friendly Giant catch them? Ah, my father said. That is the interesting part. A dream, you see, as it goes drifting through the night air, makes a tiny little buzzing humming sound. A sound so soft and low it is impossible for ordinary people to hear it. But the BFG can hear it easily. His sense of hearing is absolutely fantastic. I loved the far, intense look on my father's face when he was telling a story. His face was pale and still and distant, unconscious of everything around him. The BFG, he said, can hear the tread of a ladybird's footsteps as she walks across a leaf. He can hear the whispering of ants as they scurry around in the soil, talking to one another. He can hear the sudden shrill cry of pain a tree gives out when a woodman cuts into it with an axe. Ah, yes, my darling, there is a whole world of sound around us that we cannot hear because our ears are simply not sensitive enough. What happens when he catches the dreams? I asked. He imprisons them in glass bottles and screws the tops down tight, my father said. He has thousands of these bottles in his cave. Does he catch bad dreams as well as good ones? Yes, my father said. He catches both, but he only uses the good ones in his powders. What does he use the bad ones? Oh, what does he do with the bad ones? He explodes them. It was impossible to tell how much I loved my father. When he was sitting close to me on my bunk, I would reach out and slide my hand into his. Then he would fold his long fingers around my fist, holding it tight. What does the BFG do with his powders after he's made them? I asked. In the dead of night, my father said, he goes prowling through the villages, searching for houses where children are asleep. Because of his great height, he can reach windows that are 1 and even 2 flights up. And when he finds a room with a sleeping child, he opens his suitcase. His suitcase? I said. The BFG always carries a suitcase and a blowpipe, my father said. The blowpipe is as long as a lamppost. The suitcase is for the powders, so he has So he opens the suitcase and selects exactly the right powder. And he puts it into his blowpipe, and he slides it down the blowpipe through the window, and he blows in the powder, and the powder floats around the room, and the child breathes it in. And then what? I asked. And then, Danny, the child begins to dream a marvelous and fantastic dream. And when the dream reaches its most marvelous and fantastic moment, then the magic powder really takes over. And suddenly the dream is not a dream any longer, but a real happening. And the child is not asleep in bed. He is fully awake and is actually in the place of the dream and has taken part in the whole thing. I mean, really taking part in real life. More about that tomorrow. It's getting late. Good night, Danny. Go to sleep. My father kissed me and then turned down the wick of the little paraffin lamp until the flame went out. He seated himself in front of the wood stove, which now made a lovely red glow in the dark room. Dad, I whispered. Oh, more like, Dad, I whispered. What is it? Have you actually seen the big friendly giant? Once, my father said. Only once. You did? Where? I was out behind the caravan, my father said. And it was a clear, moonlit night. And I happened to look up, and suddenly I saw this tremendous tall person running along the crest of the hill. He had a queer, long-striding, lolloping gait, and his black coat was streaming out behind him like the wings of a bird. There was a suitcase in one hand and a blowpipe in the other, and when he came to the high hawthorn hedge at the end of the field, he just strode over it as if it wasn't there. Were you frightened, Dad? No, my father said. It was thrilling to see him, and a little eerie, but I wasn't frightened. Go to sleep now. Good night. Okay, that's the end of chapter 2. What can you remember? Pause now and have a think or a conversation with the people around you. Okay. What I remember from the chapter is that Danny's father may seem serious, but he's actually really funny. And he's something called an eye smiler, which means he doesn't smile with his mouth, like most people. He smiles with his eyes. And he's a marvelous storyteller. He can create stories, new stories, each night. And this is a little photo of what the BFG might look like. Of course, Roald Dahl actually has a book titled The BFG, which is a story I read when I was little. Okay, so those are the recaps of what happened in this chapter. Chapter 3 is called Cars and Kites and Fire Balloons. What do you think will happen next?